Yeah, so they don't call it the practice of law for nothing. And especially in a field like EB-5, that changes pretty often. I think that as professionals in the EB-5 space, we're constantly keeping track of what USCIS is doing in terms of policy changes, how the laws have changed. There's new case law that comes up, and we'll talk about some of that. But essentially you need an advocate on your side, an EB-5 immigration attorney who understands all of these things and knows how to apply them to your situation and to your case. So you might be in the middle of your source of funds process and a new case law comes out or a new case gets won against USCIS that kind of changes the interpretation of something that's applicable to your case. You want an attorney that's going to be able to apply that to your case immediately versus someone who doesn't even know that it happened. And then, even on a more micro level, a good attorney is really going to prevent what you might call careless mistakes on a lot of the EB-5 process. When you start getting into the forms, you start getting into the various different steps that it takes to file an EB-5 application. You'll note that there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different forms that all correlate to one another. Each form has a lot of different sections that have to be filled out accurately. And so the first and foremost thing is just working with an experienced EB-5 immigration attorney is going to it's going to prevent errors. And to your point, Sam, I think the catastrophic downside to a lot of these is especially with the visa bulletin one, right? Like if you don't if for whatever reason USCIS just chooses to reject you, even if it's improperly, and let's say you've got something that's really important on the line. Let's say maybe you're running out of status and you need that adjustment of status to remain in the United States. Let's say that you've got a kid who's aging out and you need to get that application in before they turn 21. These are unfixable mistakes once you miss a deadline, right? Or it's a really uphill battle to get USCIS to basically nunc pro tunc it, which means basically go back in time and basically apply an earlier date to a filing because of a simple mistake. And so it's so important to have an attorney who understands one, what's on the line for each client and kind of what hangs in the balance, but two, just be super careful. Like we said at the very beginning, EB-5 is constantly changing. There's, not volatility, but this is a relatively newer area of immigration law and it's constantly undergoing reform and change. And so having an attorney who's abreast of all those changes and is aware of all the different ways that USCIS can mess up and taking proactive steps to avoid that is going to be an attorney that gets you a better outcome. Yeah, look, I mean, when you're talking to an attorney, you're really looking for two things. One, you're looking for someone who's going to put together a source of funds that's going to be approved by USCIS. And then two, just as importantly, you're looking for an immigration attorney who's going to guide you through the immigration processes and deal with USCIS. For both of these, knowledge is power. The more experience and practice that they've had doing both of these things, the better they're going to be. So understanding how long they've been practicing, how many cases they've done, where those cases have come from, right? If you are an Indian foreign national who's got funds coming from India, well, guess what? India has very specific RBI restrictions and currency export restrictions that only an attorney who has dealt with Indian source of funds would know. If you're a Chinese investor coming from mainland China and you've got to move funds across borders, you know the challenges that come with that. You want an attorney who has done that before and can guide you accordingly. So it's extremely important to have uh, kind of a little bit of due diligence questions ready when you're speaking with an attorney of, hey, just want to make sure that you've done this type of case before. What problems have you seen? I think proactively asking that question to an attorney will really help illuminate just how much that attorney knows about that topic, right? There's problems with every aspect of EB-5. So if an attorney just says, "Oh yeah, like we don't see many problems," that's usually just not true, right? There's a lot of issues that come up at every stage and with every source of funds. So an attorney who identifies those to you proactively before you even have the conversation about your specific situation can really show you that, okay, this attorney knows what they're talking about. They know what to look for, and I can kind of trust them. There's a lot more people who are waiting for green cards than there are green cards available in any one year. The question really now has become just how long is that backlog going to be, right? What do we think it's going to look like, and just how long is it going to take for us to get out of it? And kind of understanding that there's only about 1,000 visas available per year in the urban high unemployment TEA, and then 2,000 available in the rural TEA. My advice to investors at this point is, look, just be ready for a backlog in both of these categories. Rural could be, anywhere from 2 to 3 years if you're from India or China to get your conditional green card. It could be shorter, it could be slightly longer, but I think that's a good timeline to keep in mind as you're applying. And then for urban, it's significantly longer if you're from India or China. Impending backlog doesn't change your long-term outlook. If you're filing now versus 2 months from now, it's not going to change when you receive your conditional green card. However, it can change when you can file your adjustment of status. So having an attorney that is cognizant of that, aware of that, and really putting together your application as quickly as possible to make sure that you don't lose out on that opportunity to get your EAD and advanced parole and lock in your child's age and ultimately keep your family in status inside the U.S. Even if you fall out of your current status is super super important. And ultimately, what you're hiring when you're hiring an attorney is an advocate on your behalf. You're hiring someone to look after you and make sure that you're making the right decisions, and you're looking for someone who's gonna go to battle for you with USCIS if it comes down to it. And so, when you're speaking with the attorneys, making sure that you're doing that due diligence on the front end, understanding their experience, understanding how much practice they've had, and understanding just how many issues they've seen and how many issues they've solved over the years is super super key. I think the best attorneys are not just ones that take on clients, but are also the ones that are taking on clients who are maybe unhappy with other attorneys and then fixing their case. And so asking your potential attorney partner if they've done that is another way to kind of determine if there's someone that you'd want to work with. So yeah, I think it's super important. Being an attorney myself, obviously, I know the nuance that comes into these rules. I think a lot of EB-5 sometimes can be just buzzwords and kind of just saying things that you've seen on a blog or something like that. But the reality is, it's so much more nuanced than that. And often there's no right answer. There's a discretionary kind of decision that needs to be made by both the attorney and the client to move forward. And the only way that you can do that correctly is if you have a really experienced practitioner who knows the ins and outs of the law, of how USCIS is going to take something, how they're going to respond, and then can advise you properly on what's best to do.